Welcome to the webinar, Role Clarity. We are going to, in this webinar, going to talk about multiple things, but first let me give a quick introduction. This webinar is being recorded. Recording will be available early next week or mid next week. So that if you miss something or if you want to share it with someone else, then you can easily do that, and we'll send you information around that. Quick introduction. My name is Peter Lijnse. I'm a leadership coach with Elite Consulting. We are very focused on business relationship management, and from that perspective, we do a lot of leadership training and workshops, certification training around business relationship management, which for us is a leadership capability. I'm joined here with Elka Schrijver. Elka will monitor chat as much as possible because apparently I don't have access to it right now. I hope to get that. If you have questions along the way or so, but there's some time for Q&A at the end. Next to our work as coaches for BRM teams or people that are interested in business relationship management, we work with a lot of different leadership teams. We also are writing some books. One of the books was out called Leading with Impact. That book is really focused on general leadership around how to create in a simple way impact. So the topic for today will end up in one of the next books in the series, and role clarity is very important as a foundational element for a lot of teams. So what I'm going to focus on in this session is the following. I am going to talk about some major challenges in organizations. Some challenges that we see that which are maybe generic, but you will find that a lot of these are directly related to one specific thing. And then we're going into role clarity. I'm first going to talk about dialogue and complexity and the elements around role clarity around that. Then role clarity structure, how to build a structure for role clarity, and then the last couple of slides will be around the approach to role clarity. So what steps do you take to be able to get there? So the first thing I'm going to do is talking about challenges. Now, not surprising, of course, these are the standard challenges: the trust, the communication, shared purpose, and decision making. Role clarity, interdependence, diversity, flexibility, agility, all of those kind of things are coming up. But if you really look at this, these are all elements of collaboration. So when we start to think about the main challenges is that we want to collaborate. And one of the key elements, of course, for collaboration is role clarity. It is one of those challenges where you always needs to focus on, okay, who's doing what? Yeah, how are we going to work together? Now, working together is one thing. Working together to drive very specific results, and that is important to remember. Everything we do is focused on delivering those results. Yeah, so if I build trust, why do I build trust? And trust can be broken up in the logic someone has, the authenticity, the empathy, etc. This is coming from the trust triangle from Francis Fry. It is we build trust so that we can depend on each other. Yeah, we need to communicate. We need to do certain actions. We need to have our own purpose. We need to be flexible. We need to be agile. All those kind of things are coming up. It's all about collaboration. But very specifically, and this is where I want to focus on, it is about behavior that produces results. And we do a lot of work with BRM teams around not just the techniques, etc., for BRMs or for any leader, but also talking about behavior. what actions do you take that produce results? Now, if I start to think about role clarity, in role clarity, we need to have clear understanding what each person is doing, but we also need to make sure that we link that to the right action so that we can produce the results for the organization. So everything is focused towards those results. Now, role clarity as a definition, the degree to which individuals in an organization or team understand their roles, responsibilities, and expectations. And I think that is, for me, always the nice addition to this. It is not just about, oh, okay, we're just going to do this this role, and I have these responsibilities, but also what do I expect from other people? Yeah, and that's, I think, the key part, and that requires us not to just clarify the roles and responsibilities, also what we have expectations, for instance, for behaviors from other people. Yeah, how they act in that, and then drive the results towards driving towards those results that we're looking for. So role clarity is really focused on ensuring that we know what we're doing. Yeah, and that's the key part. Now, what happens if there is no role clarity? So there is role confusion. And I just took a list of things that can happen. These are things that we see in organizations. Yeah, the frustration. Who's going to do this? Anxiety. Okay, is someone else going to do this? Yeah, because I just promised this, or I had a discussion that they really need this. And is that other group going to do this? Are they going to pick it up? Are they doing it in the time? Sometimes we feel that other groups are letting us down. We sometimes see, with especially role confusion, we can see a really low morale showing up, decreased motivation. There can be conflict. People get frustrated with each other, and it creates conflict. Decreased job satisfaction, organizational factors. There's lots of different things, and this is the emotions we quite often see coming out of role confusion. And it is always so easy. Oh, well, we just need to talk to each other, and then we'll figure it out. But there's so many different ways that we need to address this. And I think role clarity is one of them, where we can say, hey, let's address these specific emotions, basically, and translate this in something that we can actually work on. Now, how is this done in most organizations? And this is where a little bit of a different spin on this. Most organizations, when we look at this, the first thing we start doing is, okay, we need to have job descriptions. Think about it. How often have you read your own job description again, or read job descriptions of other people? It's quite often very HR related. Yes, there is value in those. Yes, there is a good description in those. But the fact is, it's not really accessible on a day-to-day basis if you have a question around who needs to do this. We see a lot of organizations doing RACI models, so the responsibility, accountability, consulted and informed, or BRM Institute quite often uses responsibility, ownership, support, consulted and informed, whatever model it is. I see a lot of organizations spending a huge amount of time on those, and quite often with not a lot of results around that. I've seen spreadsheets with 65 rows and of roles, and trying to figure out with all the activities, etc. And it just doesn't make any sense. Was the dialogue good during those sessions? Yes, but we spent a lot of time on that, but it didn't solve the role confusion, because no one is really going to, okay, who's doing this? Okay, let's pick up the RACI model and see what we do. Now, I fully understand that there are situations where this is really valuable. And I see this a lot in projects, for instance, being used. But for general leadership in complex environments, this is not always the right approach. We've seen swim lane diagrams, which are quite often related to the RACI models, which basically means, okay, everyone stays in their swim lane. You know what activities you do in there. Again, very much focused, in my opinion, on stay in your silo, stay in your own swim lane. That's already represented there. and don't step out of that. Yeah, so we create silos quite often with those kind of things. And I think with racy models, we hide the dysfunctions of organizations often as well. Role mapping, we've seen that, okay, which in certain situations, how do we map all the different roles, who is all involved in that? We sometimes say, okay, well, role clarity, we just need to talk to each other. So let's throw some technology at it. So get a collaboration tool and everyone will automatically use it, and automatically we will just work together towards results. Is there value in all of these? Is there role? I mean, if you have role documentation, yes, there is. What is missing in all of these? And I think this is the key part of role clarity. Do these things have value? Yeah, do job descriptions, racing models, swim lane, role mapping, technology tools, role documentation, they have value. But what is missing? Missing is the dialogue around it, the discussion around it, communication and how we communicate within the roles. There's quite often no coaching available, which means that there is no one there that says, okay, well, in this situation, we could do it this way or that way. Behavior is quite often not addressed. I can read a roles and responsibility table, and I have something like, yeah, but it doesn't tell me what kind of actions you expect from that. What is the behavior you expect from each of these people? It's very clinical quite often. It's like you do this, you do that. But is it really translated in clear behavior to drive results? No. And then we have complex environments. In complex environments, it's very difficult to come up with a very clear discussion around who is going to do this, how are we going to do this. Why? Because it changes per situation. The context changes the way we need to interact. So when you start thinking about those kind of things, this is where the real value lies in role clarity, in the dialogue, in the communication around it, in the coaching, in the behavioral elements, and in understanding complexity. The rest is just methods and tools and techniques that we can definitely use to support that. So if I really look at the dialogue, and let's do that one first. The dialogue in role clarity, I would say I have 4 teams that need to work together. The 4 teams deliver results. I need them to collaborate because they can't just see it as individual silos. So I need to have a dialogue with those 4 teams to be able to understand how we're fostering the understanding. How do we get there? Yeah, what do we need to do together? Is there any gray areas? Is there any things that maybe no one is going to pick up because no one is assigned to that officially, but it still needs to be done? Is there between the teams a clear understanding what direction we're going in? What happens if there is a conflict between 2 teams? How do we address that? What are the desired behaviors of the teams? Yeah, what are the desired actions we want them to take? And how do they respond to that? All of that needs to take place in the dialogue. So when we think about role clarity, we need to be focused on simple techniques that are flexible, that can handle different situations, but also that generates dialogue, that generates something that we can say, yeah, this is how we're going to do this. And that drives towards the results. It all comes back to collaboration. And like I said, role clarity is only one element of collaboration. In next year's, in 2024, we're going to do some more webinars around other elements of collaboration. Because that's, I think, for me, in the key part of when we talk about strategic partnership, when we talk about relationship management, it is about collaboration. So we need to figure that out. Now, there's one thing I want to address. This next one is something I do on a regular basis, and I wanted to share this next image because it helps me to understand different situations. And before I show it, I just want to give a little bit of background. Consultants, especially when we were working in the 90s and the beginning of this century, etc., everyone was talking about 2x2 matrices. Everyone wanted to put something in a 2x2 matrix, and you still see this. A lot of consulting firms actually do this, and it's simplified, but it sometimes actually helps us to understand what the different situations are, and if we miss something, and sometimes we need to address that. And one of the things I wanted to do from a role clarity perspective was, how do I address this when we are needing a more an agile environment, or when it's very complex? So one of the things I came up with this next model, and this was pure for me to actually get a little bit of an idea. Okay, what do I need to focus on? Now, sometimes we show these, sometimes we just use this for our own understanding. So this one was more for me to understand myself, how it changes. And I'll show you it now, but I'll also give you the process at the end, possibly how I got to this. So role clarity and complexity, and I call it a dynamic role grid. So we have role clarity that is low, or we have role clarity that is high. So yeah, there is some clarity, but we don't spend a lot of time. It's very, you could say it's informal to formal. And then we also have complexity. Now I'll pick out a few here. So structured harmony, which means we have a good understanding of role clarity. There's clearly defined roles and responsibilities. We have a low need for rapid adaptation, so we don't really need to change very quickly. We have not really a need for flexibility, task-oriented, well-known, defined workflows. That I call, I mean, if you use, for instance, the Cynefin framework from David Snowden, that would be in the clear area, which basically means best practices can be happening there. Now, what has value there from a technology perspective or from an approach perspective? Racing models can have and swim lane diagrams can have a very good value there. Why? Because it's always the same. We always do the same things. And clear roles in those kind of situations make sense. Now, if I go to the bottom one here, collaborative exploration, which is more roles are fluid. There is cross-functionality. We need some need of adaptation. There's different approaches without rigid structure, and high emphasis on open communication and teamwork. So the organization basically says, you know what, we know there are different roles, but we want to make them fluid. So we don't really need the very detailed formal role clarity, but there is also not a lot of changes. And for me, that is, I think, an area where we sometimes are, but for the wrong reasons. Yeah, sometimes you say, I just need to work with each other. And for me, this is, I think, one of the things that you can make a decision to be in that space. There is not a lot of complexity. We don't feel the need. And I see specifically smaller organizations will have the tendency to be in that space. Now, let's go to the high complexity, and let's first do the adaptive ambiguity, which I thought was a brilliant term. I'll tell you how I got to these. Roles are constantly evolving. Individuals wear multiple hats. This is very much there's complex environments. We do a lot of different experiments. We try to do a lot of different things that are never the same. So we're kind of a very innovative environment where roles need to change. And we need to have a high flexibility to address unpredictable situations. Yeah, and there is collaboration, creative problem solving, but we don't need to have everything formally defined. Then the organized agility is where we have, in a complex environment, defined roles, but adaptability within those roles. And I think that's important. High need for quick responses, balanced flexibility to navigate complex challenges, intense collaboration with a focus on problem solving. So how did I do this? Well, and this is where I have to admit AI is brilliant in this, because I had something like, I want to link role clarity to complexity. And I had something like, give me some ideas on this. And after several prompts, basically, because this was not a one thing, there was a little bit of work on getting this, it did come up with these 4 quadrants. And it's interesting to see. I mean, I had a lot of influence on this because I had some like, no, that doesn't need there, that needs to go there, etc. But it helped me to understand that, or hopefully helps you to understand as well, that certain techniques are very valuable in certain situations. So when we talk about, and I'm using RACI models, the responsibility, accountability, consulted, and informed models, they can be very valuable in a structured harmony situation. That ChatGPT came up with those words, and I had some like, yeah, I'm just going to use that. Structured harmony sounds just awful, awful and awesome at the same time. But it's for me, it's so important to start thinking about which technique makes the most sense. Now, the problem is, from a leadership perspective, especially when you're working on strategy, you have more complexity. So you're more on the complexity side most of the time. You do want to have roles defined, but you need to recognize there is complex situations. So we quite often are way more in the right-hand side here, where we are in the adaptive ambiguity and organized agility. And when we think it from that perspective, we need to start looking at, okay, how do we do this? Because if roles are constantly evolving, or if we have defined roles and we need to adapt them on a regular basis, we need to make sure that we have techniques that support that. So this is where I'm going into a little bit of the, this was a little bit more background, but a little bit more in, okay, how would you do this in those situations? So I'm staying away from the more clearly defined roles, yeah, the methods, etc. there. And if you're really excited about RACI models, please do so. As long as you recognize that when there's a lot of complexity, a lot of change, a lot of agility needed, that it is a lot of work to keep it up. And it might not give you the benefit you're looking for. So we're looking here in role clarity, really more focused on that complexity side. Now I'm going to focus on that. So first thing we do is that there, we need to have a kind of a role mandate, a concise description of primary purpose and high-level responsibilities for a specific role. This is where we normally start. Why? Because this is something that on a high level, give me 5 to 7 bullet points what your mandate is for each of the different teams that are working there. It's simple. It creates at least some understanding, and it helps us to make quick changes or adaptations when needed. Yeah, so especially in those high agility, high complexity environments, you need to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to do this slightly different. Yes, you normally do this role, but I want this group to take these actions because it makes more sense at this moment. That is their role mandate. So role mandates don't take a lot of time and effort. High level, 5 to 7 bullet points, sometimes only 3. And when I have those, I can map, basically I can use role mapping if necessary. But one of the things I can do, I can make simple tables. And simple tables that are not basically focused on who's accountable, who's owning it, whose responsibility, etc., but more focused on the work we do. And this is what we've used in several organizations. This is a little bit of a big chart, which the next one is even bigger. Sorry, I see I'm looking at the wrong one. Role clarity table structure. I normally, from the start, say key focus areas. So that's your mandate. You know, what is the scope of the role? And then I have a set of activities: strategy, plan, build, run, optimization, and communication. Now, this is already way more detailed than some of you might need. You might have some like, I just want to focus on this from a planning perspective, who does what, etc. So you don't even have to use the whole slide, but it gives you a bit of an idea. And the whole life cycle of things we do We need to understand per role what the key focus is, what the scope is of their role in that specific activity set. And we're using these high-level activity sets. We don't go into more detail than this. Why? Because then it takes too much time to actually update it. So when we do this, you can, and I'm going to show you an example. This is the big slide that takes the whole image up. But and I'll send those slides out. This is where you do a very simple activity around. Tell me for each of the roles, what do you do? Give me 3, maybe 5 bullet points in each of these cells, and that's it. We get each of the people to do that, and that makes it a lot easier to focus on. This quite often is a good dialogue, and I'll show you the approach in a moment, how we do this. But for me, this can create the discussion. It also creates the opportunity to, let's say we have a service delivery manager that is focused on, in the run phase, on operational changes and incidents, etc. And they're sitting down with their business partner and that they work with, the business unit they work with, and they have a discussion around some of the operational issues that were happening, etc. And the business partner has something like, oh, by the way, I have this new solution that I would like to get. Can you help me with that? And at that moment, you need to start thinking about, okay, well, that's not really my role. Who would do that? That might be the business relationship manager. We're more in strategy, planning activities here. Okay, let me discuss with the business relationship manager what we can do about that, if it's standard, if it's etc. So you use at that moment for yourself the table to say who else would do that. And then you would go to the business relationship manager, and the business relationship manager has something like, yeah, no, you know what? I'm completely flooded with this huge implementation for that group. I don't have time for this. This is a small initiative that can be handled by anyone. Service delivery manager, you want to handle it? You can step into the business relationship manager role. These are the things you need to do. Or go to the product manager or something like that. So you use this to have a dialogue. Okay, who should do it? Because there is ambiguity here. There's sometimes the same text in each of these areas. This has helped a lot of organizations to quickly start with role clarity. Now, you can do more things around that. Let me talk about the approach, which is the last topic, and then we'll answer some questions. The approach for this. You need to prepare yourself. You need to select working groups, facilitate workshops, scenario testing, communication, and continual improvement. I'm going to talk about each of these. So there's a slide for each of these. Now, in the prep side is, okay, which roles are we going to start with? Sometimes you only start with 3 roles. Why? Because it's easier to have a discussion at the start. First, I'm going to always ask them, what is your mandate? What is your focus areas? What are some of that are valid? What are not valid? We need to prepare the table. Sometimes you already know what other groups are doing, so you fill it in for them. You might actually look at, okay, where do we need to be on that dynamic role grid area? So is it complexity? Is it standard? And that can drive how detailed we want to get. So that's your preparation. The next step is to select a working group. The best way to do this is to get from each of the different groups a representation. Let them pre-fill their role clarity table for their specific role. And sometimes they do that separate from the whole team. So the person that represents that specific team, for instance, will work with their peers to say, okay, how would we fill this in? Instruct them justly, 3 to 7 bullet points per cell, not more. Just keep it short, simple. And make sure that the people that actually are in your working group can make decisions around the role, of course, because if they constantly have to go back and forth, it doesn't really a little bit of cultural elements. Now, when we do this, we then can facilitate workshops. Now, those can be several workshops where you just go through, you let each of the groups represent what their big topics are that they are addressing. And this is where you start seeing nuanced differences. Yeah, two roles can be part of a planning activity. One is focused on building the plan. The other one is more focused on providing input to the plan. You can define that. Yeah, you can change the wording a little bit to make sure that that is clear. You can even go and discuss desired behaviors of the role. Yeah, if you want to address that, what are some of the behaviors we want to have when we do these activities? And then finalize the role clarity table at the work group. Now, this can be several iterations. Yeah, this can take a couple of months, sometimes a workshop every couple of weeks to further develop this. It's not a huge amount of time. People just need to spend some time on filling this in. And I think this is the first part of the dialogue, that real dialogue around the role clarity. Now, when I have that, I can do scenario testing. And what that means, it can actually take a couple of scenarios and run that through with the team. So you do basically, it's not really a tabletop exercise, but you really say, okay, in this specific situation, with these roles would be involved. Okay, let's go from the start. What was the initial idea? Who was involved there? Does that work with the table? Yes, okay, it works. Okay, and we work through that specific scenario. It helps you understand. It gives you examples, and the team will understand, okay, how would we do this? Now, the challenge here, of course, is if it's a complex environment and you use a complex scenario, some people might say, yeah, but in another situation, we do it like this. That is the value of the dialogue. Yeah, understanding that there's different ways of doing this. And instead of trying to capture all of that, you try to say, no, let's just keep continuing going with what we have, as long as we know that if this comes up, let's have the dialogue. So that's, you do some scenario testing, you communicate then the rest to executive management. This is what we've come up with. We connect, you need to bring it to the wider audience. We did find, though, that even those tables are sometimes too complex for people to read. They don't read them. So we quite often then need to translate it in BRM role in practice. What does someone do in a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? If it's a BRM role, for instance, as an example. So you need to have summary documents. You might say, and you know what, I want to have a little bit more expectations of roles, of desired behavior further developed. You can start doing that. You need to make it accessible for people in a simple way. And this is, I think, one of the challenges we have. A RACI model, as an example, or even swimline diagrams in process flows, etc., are not accessible. And we need to translate this. So even this role clarity table that I just showed you can sometimes be too detailed. And we need to work with the groups. This is where the coaching is so important. Yeah. And this is also where the situation is, if someone says, I don't know who should be involved in here, that you go to that mandate from the different groups, that you go to that role clarity table and say, okay, well, based on this table, who should be involved? Okay, let's make that decision. So the communication around this is quite often very much focused on driving the understanding, the dialogue, understanding the context, understanding the complexity of that. This is not something that you do once. This is ongoing. And I think it needs to be part of ongoing leadership to always go back to, are we doing the right things? Yeah. Now, last part, of course, is continual improvement. What roles need to be assessed, need to be added? Yeah, you had 3 roles. Okay, there's a 4th role. Okay, that changes everything. Okay, how are we going to do that? So this might be an ongoing activity, but it is a living document. It's constantly being updated when needed, or at least we have the dialogue around it, what we need to do. And creating that dialogue is more important than the document itself. Yeah. And this is where also in certain situations, if you are in a low complex environment and you require high level of role clarity, I mean, look at a ship, for instance. If you look at the Navy, it's extremely clear who does what. Everyone has their own role. Everyone knows exactly what to do. But they do that in the same way every single time. Can they handle complex issues? Yes, because it's built into their roles, yeah, how to do that. But they still know, okay, how we're doing those kind of things. Sometimes your roles change due to maturity. Your initial role might be very tactical, operational, and you realize that you're putting yourself more and more in a more strategic role. There's different things that you can think about and, from that perspective. So you never stop with role clarity. Role clarity is ongoing. Now, what is the key part though? It's that dialogue, it's that communication, it's coaching other people. Yeah, it's addressing the complex challenges, the behavior. That is part of that continual improvement. So build simple tables. Keep them simple. If you just want to have a list with mandates at the start, that works already. It's already better than anything before. Every time it is not really clear, you have a dialogue. And I find in certain areas that we have so many people just saying, well, that's that other group. And when I hear, oh, that's that other group that does that, have you talked to them? Have you discussed this with them? Did you have the dialogue? So role clarity works well if we do this as part of cultivating relationship networks. And then this is where I bring it back to relationships, because the dialogue around role clarity not only clarifies responsibility, but also nurtures understanding, trust, and respect in any relationship. And I think this is the key part that you need to understand. You have that relationship network. You work with different people. If we understand mandates from each of the different teams, it is not about creating silos, it's around creating the dialogue. Relationships require a clear understanding of what we communicate in the organization, but also what behavior we need to have. Every single network that you manage requires that role clarity. And this can help you as a tool to be able to drive better relationships, more trust, or higher trust, better collaboration. And I think that is the key importance of this. If your relationship network changes, which it does on a regular basis, different context, different complexity, dynamic, etc., your roles might change. Yeah, what one group does in certain situations, another group doesn't do that, or it doesn't do that in other situations. So you have to make sure it's dynamic, and that's why we quite often focus on approaches in organizations that are simple for this, instead of trying to go in too much detail. I had one client years ago that when I talked about racing models, that I didn't really like them because they're not really being used in organizations into the way they should be used. They only work in very specific situations, like clear and clear processes, really best practices, workflows that we know it's standard. It's always done the same way. That's where they work. And the team lead had something like, yeah, he said, we just spent $1 million on a big consulting firm building all racing models for our whole organization. And so I'm like, okay, sorry to hear that. That's but also, how does it work? And he said, it doesn't. We don't use them. We've done all this effort, and to be honest, it hasn't changed a bit. So make sure, and that's the message I want to bring basically here, is that when you do role clarity, you keep it simple. I showed you a simple approach to start with this. Is it difficult to get everyone going, etc.? Absolutely. It's not easy. And if at any moment in time You have some like, can you help us with that? We facilitate these workshops. We do actually and half-day workshops with organizations around this. But we keep it at that, and then say your next step is you. Yeah, you need to start further developing this if you want to have more detail in there. But getting the organization to accept that, I think, is the key part. So on that note, Elka, I'm at Q&A. I'm not sure if there were questions. I think I figured out a way in the meantime how to see chat, but I don't want to read them.
Just a couple of comments that are popping in at the end. We do not have many questions yet. So for everyone, if you have questions, put them in the chat or raise your hand about, and we can unmute you and raise your question in the group.
There were some comments in there.
Comments.
Do you want to address any of those comments or not?
Comment from Sabina, those races are not flexible and can stall progress as staff refer to confirm their role and can't find themselves. That is not by job. So reiterating what you said, they're not easily accessible role descriptions. Racy charts are not useful if you need to stop what you're doing to actually check documentation to see if that is what you should be doing.
Yeah. No, and it's also something to hide behind, to be honest, because there's people that just have some line. Well, it's not in a racy chart, so I don't have to do anything on this. That's not my job. That's not my problem. Sometimes that's even beyond that, and I think that's the key part is indeed have the discussion, have the dialogue. Yeah, go ahead.
Other comment. What I like about this so far is the emphasis on the dialogue and the personal touch of listening and understanding. Our organization is very technical, and so the focus on the races and the documentation of role. But I agree that having the interaction is so very important.
This is the challenge for technical organizations, and it doesn't matter if it's engineering or IT or technology. We have the tendency to be very black and white, and it's like it either fits in my role or it doesn't. And for me, that is, I think, it works well that when we talk about simple workflows. Yeah. So if I'm using an IT example here, but if I have a service desk or a service request, or I have, for instance, onboarding, which includes HR, facilities, etc. I know it's a standard workflow. I know it's always the same way. This is what we're going to do. These are the order we're doing that, etc. It makes sense to have clear roles and responsibilities in there, predefined. But the moment you get to, I don't really know what the problem is. I need to do some root cause analysis. I need maybe an architect involved in there. I need maybe someone from HR involved in there. I need my business group maybe in there. So I don't know. This is a complex situation. I need to do some experiments to be able to actually get that. So for me, that is the key part. Yeah. So.
Okay. And we had Bridget with her hand up. So maybe Bridget, I can unmute you and.
Yeah, thank you. I was typing, but I'll quit typing and just ask the question out loud. So in our organization, what I'm trying to get to, and this has been great, and I've taken a lot of notes, but how do we as BRM really drive the change, like with our PMO and partners who really may be unwilling to move away from a RACI model? Or, I mean, we've got like project charters and they're like, this is the RACI, this is what people do. And then nobody talks, like to your point earlier, Peter, I mean, it's just like, all right, it's in the RACI, so that's not my, and I don't know what Sabina, I think said it, not my job. So how do we as BRMs help the organization kind of drive that change? Like that's where I'm trying to like get my BRM brain to go, come with us. This is what we need. But yeah, it's so difficult to pull people along with us. Like we get it, but it's just like that's where I'm trying to like the how. Maybe you can help with that, Peter, Elka.
Yeah, I think the how here is you need to get them to have a dialogue around role clarity. But a lot of people will immediately ask, "Oh, we have racing models. We know exactly what we're going to do. This is the box I'm working in, and I'm not stepping out of that box." That's a little bit of a mentality. I think executive management needs to handle some of that as well. But I also think that when you really let's say you bring two teams together and let them have a dialogue around this, then you'll start to see that, okay, yeah, no, I get it. Okay, yeah, you do this, I do that. And so we have a quick dialogue around it. The problem is that's a one-time activity. And as the person who initiated it, they then think that every single time there's a conflict or so, you will address that. And it's not sustainable. So somehow we need to change the behavior from people that if there is a situation where it makes it easier to talk to each other, and then instead of just hiding behind a certain model, that is something that we need to instill. So this is where organizational behavior management comes in. This is where BRMs can play a significant role. And that means that you need to start defining what is the desired behavior. How can we make that sustainable? How can we make that active, measurable, etc.? But also then start rewarding people. And I think that's the key part for doing that. So you want to reward, and not financial reward necessarily, but you need to reward the people that do have the dialogue and make it happen instead of trying to just reward people for just staying within their box, etc. So the high level mandate can actually help. And I'm sure Elka will have something like, I can add. So.
A brief comment indeed to the mandate. What does help, Bridget, and what I've worked with organizations about is a project charter that you reference is behavior and roles for a particular initiative. But if we take like 10 steps back and have a conversation, a more general conversation first about how do our groups generally interact, and that comes back to that mandate with 3 to 5 bullets per team. Can we get in our operating model discussion with leaders a general idea of what's the purpose of each of our teams in the whole of our organization? And that sets the stage. If we can get agreement on that high level scope of our team, that sets the stage for that dynamic dialogue of, okay, and in this situation, this is how it plays out. And in this situation, here's how it plays out. So that high level conversation, especially when a BRM team gets introduced, does not take place. We're just trying to wedge ourselves into an existing or presumed to be existing operating model. And now we're trying to, from the bottom up through those ratio charts per project, try to wedge our way in. What needs to happen, as I said, with senior leadership, with function or group or department leadership, is have that high level discussion first. So we have an agreement in principle of how all the pieces fit together. Then it becomes a whole lot easier to go back to an initiative, a project charter, and discuss in this project, here's how each fits together. And you always have your 3 to 5 bullet mandate slide to fall back on. But if we can't get an agreement on principle, your RACI charts won't do you any good because it will keep being a tug of war. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you both. That's very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I see Avery has her hand up as well. So Avery.
You need to unmute still.
Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Go.
So we've done this in our organization, and maybe just a couple of comments I wanted to share from our experience with this is in some regards, I would say that this isn't necessarily different from a RACI chart in the sense that people aren't going to go back and look at this. I 100% agree with Peter that it's the dialogue that it makes this valuable. And so the continuous improvement and the, if it's annual reviews and updates with key individuals from each role resurfaces the dialogue. It helps bring this back around. Otherwise, it's really only relevant to the original group that kind of worked through it in that kind of time frame. And then after a couple months, it's like people will forget about it, I feel like. So I think continuing to have that dialogue, resurfacing the dialogue to revisit it, make sure it's current, relevant, is very valuable. Just from my own experience with this, we've also, getting to the question about how did you get leadership, because our leadership was very focused on a RACI diagram initially. And I think we had to really point out that people aren't using the RACI diagrams. It's very black and white, which I'm from an IT organization, as Peter said, they definitely want, I do this and I don't do that. But we really surfaced this as a guide for how we would interact. It's not, every situation is not black and white. It's like project management. There's dependencies, there's uniquenesses. It depends on the context. So we can use this role clarity table for a guide in every situation to make sure that you have the right roles engaged depending on, what is the key focus, what's the strategy, the different capabilities within that diagram. And again, that would allow us to have further dialogue around it too, potentially iterate on it and update it if there were things that weren't really captured initially. So it's been a really useful tool for us, primarily because of the dialogue. We've had a lot of leadership be very supportive of it and try to help, I know, Peter, you don't like the word socialize, but help socialize it or present it to a wider audience in IT, which then has brought up other questions during those presentations and brought forward ideas for other roles that we should incorporate into our role clarity diagram. And right now, I think we started out with the BRM and we have senior service owners. We also have project and program managers in there. And I think we're going to be looking at introducing product managers and owners into this. But there's a number of roles, architects, portfolio managers, that aren't included in this. But I think just the guide of it really iterates that it requires dialogue. It requires connecting with each other, understanding context. It's not like you can go off of a RACI chart and just say, here's what I'm focused on, and this is all I do. I stay within this box. So I don't know if that helps, but that's.
Thanks, Avery. I mean, I hadn't invited you to give the presentation together, which I should have done maybe, because I know a lot of the work we've done together on this. But yes, it absolutely is what Avery said. It's been a long process. I know that, but it's also has been very valuable as seen in the organization to do this in a simple way. So yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. That was great. Good.
And I saw the question from Sabina. How would you associate this with traditional project management, given that we just talked to Bridget's question about project management? I think we answered this, but Sabina, was there any additional question you have about this, or was it indeed answered earlier? Let me see if I can. You can either unmute yourself or put it in the chat.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. And I did start to type, but no, I think what Bridget has said, in that discussion was perfect, because we're so all accustomed to the project management pieces, and as we look at the BRM role, it kind of slides and in multiple directions. In the workplace, and how do you influence the traditional project management not to be so rigorous and rigid in developing these tables and these racy charts and these swim lanes, because I was one of them, looking for that. And I find that it just doesn't work anymore, especially in the complexities that we have today and the agile view of the different problems that are trying to be solved. Everybody has different pieces, and those pieces constantly change. So thank you for the discussion.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. I'm going to wrap up this webinar, making sure that we stay within the time. The next webinar is going to be in January. We are going to do a couple of these. This one actually is around future of BRM, but one of the things we're going to do in that next webinar is talking about building more going into the collaboration. We're going to have a whole series of elements of collaboration. We're going to talk as BRM as a leadership capability, so not just for BRM teams, but really as leaders. We need to understand BRM, and we'll introduce in that webinar our BRM framework, which we are working on right now to finalize, and that will be part of our next book. So around that time, the book will be in draft version, I think. So we'll see that. Now, if you have any questions around role clarity or anything else, feel free to contact us, and I'm looking forward to seeing everyone potentially in the next webinar or in a personal conversation where you have something like, I need to know more about this or that. So feel free to do that. So thank you very much for attending, and have a wonderful day.